In the last episode, I hit an all-time PR of 585 pounds, 265 kilos for 3 reps. I'd never hit it for more than 1. And I asked you guys if you thought I was good for 600 pounds for at least 2 reps. And a lot of you guys responded with a lot of positivity. So today, I'm putting it to the test and I'm going for 600 pounds for 2 to 3 reps. That's 272.5 kilos. We did it, guys. 600 pounds for 3 reps. You guys called it in the last video. I'm so amped about that. That's an all-time personal best. And what's crazy is it's March 11th. At this time last year, on March 31st, I believe it was, I was aiming to hit my first 600-pound deadlift in a competition ever at 181. So to be able to be tripling that a year later, of course, I'm a little thicker than 181 these days. I'm hanging in the high 190s, but I'll take it. That's awesome. So that said, welcome back to part 2 of the deadlift series. I hope you saw part 1. Super important. Go back and watch it. If you didn't, it's in the info box below. It's how to find your perfect setup, your perfect starting position for a conventional deadlift. No matter how you're built, we went over grip, stance, all that fun stuff. Now in part 2, we're gonna dive in even deeper. We're gonna pick apart how to perfect that starting position, how to perfect your deadlift, and how to identify and correct little tiny mistakes you're probably not even aware you're making in the deadlift. All I ask in return for this free information is that you just give this video a thumbs up to get it circulating and shit, and that you enjoy. Now in the first video we went over 3 major rules of deadlifting. 1, never deadlift in sneakers. You promised me you wouldn't, we went over why. 2, the bar must always be over your center of gravity. We identified where that was, right in the center of your foot. 3, the bar must always trace its bar path, the 90-degree angle that is in line with your center of gravity. Let's recap that really fast. If you look at a deadlift from a side point of view, in a locked out position, you should be able to draw a line from the bar down to the floor and have that line cut your foot in half right through the center of the arch. Where that line cuts your foot in half, that is your center of gravity. That center point of your foot is where the bar needs to remain above at all times. It should never fall in front of that line or behind that line. When the rep begins, the bar should trace that 90-degree line from top to bottom, from bottom to top, the entire time. That is your bar path. If the bar moves outside of that line in any direction, it means the weight is moving outside of your center of gravity. Something is wrong. A great way to test your deadlift form and see if you are on point or need to improve on something is by simply filming yourself from the side. Place your hand or even a pen so it's covering the barbell at the bottom of your hand and your hand stretching straight up towards the ceiling at a 90-degree angle. And then watch the rep. If the barbell moves outside of your hand in either direction during the rep, it means it's straying outside of the bar path. Something is wrong. At the end of this video, we'll actually put my 600 for 3 side view up to this test and pick apart what we could do better. See, if a weight is too far in front of us or too far behind us, we either tip forward or we fall backward. And even if the weight is light enough to where we can maintain our balance and still lift it, we end up being weaker. We end up lifting from an unoptimal position, trying to leverage up weight that's too far in front of us or too far behind us. Imagine you're doing a shoulder press, and instead of gripping the bar in the center of the bar like normal, you grip it off to the left. Imagine how much heavier the right side of the bar is now gonna feel. You're gonna be exerting so much more energy pushing with the right side of your body than you are with the left. You just made yourself weaker at shoulder pressing and expose yourself to so many more injuries simply by being off center. Now that's a wacky, exaggerated example, but it applies to the deadlift. If the bar is too far in front of you, you're not gonna be able to lift it. Or if you do lift it because it's light, you're not gonna be in a good deadlift position anymore. You're gonna see that it turns into a stiff-legged deadlift mixed with a good morning, and that's dangerous for your lower back, and it's gonna make you a lot weaker. Vice versa, if the bar is too far behind your center of gravity, of course the bar can't physically be behind you because we're standing behind the bar, but it can be too close to your shins. It can fall behind that center foot line. If that happens, it forces you to sit back under your heels too much, and that can cause a whole array of problems as well, Like we said in part 1, we don't want to sit the weight on our heels. We want to sit the weight onto the center of our feet, pushing the arches of our feet down into the ground. See, our bodies are an amazing thing. They follow the laws of physics when they lift. And physics makes it so that if we start lifting a weight from a weak position, our bodies, mid-rep, will readjust themselves automatically. We won't even mean to. We just automatically reposition ourselves into a stronger position to finish lifting that weight up. And that's not safe. A good example of this is when we're bench pressing. If you're bench pressing with poor form and you end up struggling, what happens? Your elbows flare out and your hips rise up off the bench into the air. Your elbows are flaring out to help move the bar further back over your face to help lock it out, and your hips are rising up to put you into a decline position, a stronger position to finish locking that bar out. And you'll find that you probably do end up locking that bar out, but it's ugly and it's bad form and it's very dangerous. This is because your body does not care about good or bad form. It doesn't know what good or bad form is. Your body's just following the laws of physics. So when you start applying pressure to lift something, your body's just going to try and move into its strongest position, move that weight back into its center of gravity as much as it can. And if it does that in the middle of a rep, chances are it's dangerous. To avoid this, we want to simply get into a perfect position before we start the rep. If we start in a perfect position, we're going to remain in a perfect position, a safe position throughout the whole entire rep, and our body won't adjust. The most popular example of our bodies adjusting on us during a deadlift is shooting hips. When your hips shoot up on you. We've all seen it, we've all probably done it. What happens is when you start going to pull on the bar itself does not leave the ground. Instead, your hips start rising up behind you. They rise, rise, rise till they get to a certain point, and when they stop rising, then the bar finally leaves the ground. 9 out of 10 times, shooting hips is actually just a symptom of you starting the rep with your hips too low to the ground. So they're rising up to find their actual starting position. What's interesting is if you ever watch a clip of yourself deadlifting or you watch a friend deadlift and their hips shoot up on them, make a note of where their hips stop shooting as the bar lifts off the ground. Wherever your hips land right before the bar lifts off the ground is actually closer to where your hips should be starting in the deadlift. It's usually going to be a little bit higher than a lot of people think. See, the biggest mistake people make in deadlift, the biggest sin of deadlift, the root of all deadlift evil, is squatting your deadlift, trying to squat into your deadlift. And I get it, we're always taught lift with your legs, not with your back. So we think if we squat into the deadlift more, we're gonna drive with our legs more and not so much our back. The problem with this is we don't use our legs in a deadlift the same way we use our legs in the squat. And we went over this in part 1 as well. The mechanics of our lower body in a deadlift is a lot more similar to a standing vertical leap or a standing long jump than it is a squat. If we try squatting deep into a vertical leap, we're not going to get a lot of power in our jump. So what do? Instead, we push our hips back and we bend our knees just enough to allow our hips to hinge and then explode. That's how it works in the deadlift. So squatting into your deadlift will not only make you weaker, it's going to throw you out of a good deadlifting position. So when your hips are really low to the ground like that, they have no leverage to start lifting that bar off the ground. So as soon as you start applying pressure and trying to lift, your hips are aborting mission and they're rising up and searching for that point of leverage. They reach a certain point where they're supposed to be, then they have leverage. Then they're able to leverage that bar off the ground. So again, when you film yourself doing a deadlift, if you see your hips rising at all, pause the video right when that bar starts to leave the ground and make a note of where your hips are. That's about where your hips should start. And of course, if your hips shoot up on you accidentally, they might shoot up a little too fast, you might get a little loose, they might overshoot, they might shoot a little too high. But that's why we went over exactly where to set them up in part 1 of this. Now that's a very obvious, easy to spot example of your body readjusting on you, but a lot of the examples are actually much harder to spot in a deadlift. They're almost invisible, and you almost don't even feel them half the time because of how subtle they are, but they can make a difference. The best way to spot them is that trick of watching the bar path from the side, using your hand or a pen as your bar path line. If you notice the barbell deviating from your bar path in any direction, it means one of two things. One, you started the rep with the bar outside of your center of gravity. You either started with the bar just in front of your center of gravity or behind your center of gravity too close to your body. And again, the difference is very subtle. It'll almost look like your feet are perfectly centered under the bar. This is why you need to use the bar path test to find out. A few millimeters too far forward or a few millimeters back can make a difference. The other option is that your barbell is set up right over your center of gravity, perfect, but your body is not positioned correctly. So while your bar starts in the center of gravity, the second you start pulling, your mechanics are all off and they force the bar out of the center of gravity once the rep begins. Being too loose can also add to this as well. You can be in a decent position, but if you're really loose, you may not be able to hold that position, which can also make you fall out of position and move the bar away from the center of gravity once the rep begins. And of course, it can be a combination of all of this combined. Let's look at an example of options option one, starting with a bar outside of your center of gravity. I mentioned squatting into a deadlift is the biggest sin, and squatting can be done in a bunch of different ways. I see people squat over the bar, forward, and I see people squat behind the bar, pulling their whole bodies back behind the bar. Both are equally bad, just in different ways. One common mistake I see with squatters is they force their knees forward. They focus on that forward knee travel. When you do a normal squat, what happens? Your knees come forward, your shins lower towards the ground. That's a normal squat. Problem is when you try doing that with a deadlift, your knees can only go so far forward before your shins hit the bar. And we know we can't push that bar out of the way. So what do we do to allow our knees to continue moving forward to get into a deeper squat? We scoot our feet back. We pull our feet backwards away from the bar, just a hair. We usually don't even realize we're even doing it, because again, it still feels centered. I'm showing you an exaggerated example in this video, but like I said, this is usually just a matter of millimeters, if not no more than a centimeter. You don't notice it half the time, but they scoot their feet back ever so slightly, allowing them to push their knees just a little bit more forward and get into a slightly deeper squat position. And now because they're forward over the bar, their shoulders are still on top of the bar where they should be, they feel like they're in a good position. It creates an illusion. They don't realize their feet are too far back. The bar is now in front of their center of gravity. When this happens, you'll know it, because when you do the bar path test, the bar will leave the ground and swing inward towards your body. It'll swing towards the lifter. If the bar swings in towards the lifter, it means it started too far away from them and it's trying to correct itself and bring it back over the center of gravity. Now, to avoid this mess, some lifters will go in the opposite direction and they'll try to scoot up really close to the bar, as close as they can. If your shins are touching the bar while you're standing upright, you are too close to the bar if you're doing a conventional deadlift. Shins should never be in contact with the bar from a standing position. What happens when you bend down into a starting position is that your knees have no room to travel forward at all. So your shins remain in a 90-degree angle even in your starting position. Shins should never be in a 90-degree angle in the starting position of a conventional deadlift. The first example was shins too far forward. This is shins not forward enough. There's a happy medium, a balance, and we went over how to find that balance in part one. Now what's going to happen here with the bar path test is two things. If you manage to keep your upper body tilted over the bar while keeping your shins straight up and down, you're going to find that your legs are already more locked out than they should be. You're not going to be able to get a lot of leg drive because there's no bend in the knee. So as soon as you start pulling that weight, your legs are probably going to lock out right away. We want our knees and our hips to lock out at the exact same time and only at the top of the rep. So your legs are going to lock out right away before your hips do, and then you're going to give it all to your back. It'll be a stiff leg deadlift. That's when you see lifters stall out right at their knees. It's really common. The other way is if you kept your shins 90-degree angle, but you pulled your whole body back behind the bar, feeling like it's going to give you a more upright torso, well, now your entire body's behind the bar. And we said in the last video that we need part of our upper body in front of the bar. Our head, neck, and most of our shoulders should be in front of the bar. Our rear delts should be on top of the bar at all times. So if you start from this position being completely behind the bar, what's going to happen is your whole body is first going to tilt forward, because again, it's correcting itself. Your body's bringing itself over the bar so it can gain leverage on that bar. While this happens, your hips will shoot up, of course, and then you'll likely be able to keep a bent knee this time because you started with a more bent knee to begin with. So what you'll see with the bar path test is the bar tends to swing out away from the lifter to get around the knees and to get back into that center of gravity, since it started behind the center of gravity. This momentum can pull you forward, pulling all the weight onto your toes, which is going to make you lose balance and power. These are some really popular examples of what tends to go wrong in a deadlift, and of course they happen to different extents, and they're usually very small and subtle. And remember to try out that bar path test to correct your deadlift. If the bar swings away from you, you're too close to the bar. If the bar swings towards you, you're too far away from the bar. If the hips are shooting up, the hips are starting too low, and if your body moves forward, you're starting too far behind the bar. So let's look at my PR from a side point of view. Here's 600 pounds for 3, and we're setting up our bar path now based on where the bar is while it's on the ground before the bar moves. Now I'm already seeing a red flag here. Look how far back my heels are. Unless I have a size 23 shack foot, there's no way that bar is over the center of my little size 10 shoe here. So it already looks like I'm breaking one of the rules we talked about, where I'm trying to bend the knees too far forward over the bar and I'm pulling my feet back away from the bar too much. And that's always been a problem of mine. I've always been very quad dominant to begin with, and I've always had a fear of going stiff leg, so it kind of makes sense. So watch what happens as we begin this first pull. The first pull is always going to be the cleanest because you have the most energy and you took your time setting up the longest. So we pull, and of course the bar moves back towards our body. Boom, right there. Not good. It strayed off of that bar path. It moved in towards our body. That meant I started with it too far in front of my center of gravity. And you can see where it was on my feet. That was more over my toes than my center foot, like I said. So, of course, the bar lands inside, closer to my body. And like we said, if you're holding the bar in a standing position, you should be able to draw a line from the bar to the floor and have that line cut your foot in half, and that's your perfect center of gravity. So here is actually where my center of gravity is. This is where the bar should actually be on the floor. So that's a mistake. We need to fix it. But I want to point out something. That was a clean mistake. So the bar strayed off the bar path, but it did so in a straight line. So it's still moving in a nice straight line. The line is just slanted to the left now instead of being straight up and down 90-degree angle. That's still bad. That's still something we need to fix, but you'll see an example of a non-clean mess up in a second. So as I put the bar down, you see where it lands. Boom, it lands behind our first line. This is more accurate to where it should have started in the first place. It lands over my true center of gravity. But what do I go and do? I break the biggest law of deadlifting and I move the bar forward. As I reset, I roll the bar forward with my shins, and boom, now the bar's right back to where it started the first rep, in front of my center of gravity. But now watch the second rep. Each rep, you'll notice, gets progressively worse because you're getting more and more tired with each rep. And every time the bar lands, it's landing slightly off center, unless you take time to fix it. So with this rep, we pull it, and the same thing happens. It's still a more or less clean mess up, but this time it lands really far away from the line. It's further back from the line than the first rep. Now, how did that happen? If the bar is starting in the same exact position as it started in the first rep, how is it landing even further away at the top? This time, what I did wrong was I did not push my hips forward. If we look at the first rep I did a good job of pushing those hips forward. So I started with the bar too far in front of my center of gravity, but I at least humped those hips forward and met the bar halfway. So the hips stayed forward and boom, we kept it as close to the bar path as possible. This time, because of fatigue most likely, I did not hump my hips forward enough. So instead of pushing my hips to the bar, I made the big mistake of pulling the bar back towards my hips. And you can see it. You can see it. My knees are bent. My hips are trying to lock out. It's almost looking like more of a hitching position now. I tried squatting the bar a little bit too much. I didn't extend the hips forward and hump the bell. So boom, we lock out with the bar even further back away from us. Now watch what goes wrong in the third rep. The third rep is by far the ugliest because I'm the most tired now. When I drop the bar, this bar rolls even further away from our bodies. This third rep, the bar starts way in front of our center of gravity, even further in front of our center of gravity than the first two reps. Really, really bad right there. But of course, I'm so in the groove, my adrenaline's flowing, I'm not even noticing it. I'm just go, 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 go. This is how injuries can start to happen if you're not aware of this. So as I pull here, this is an example of a messy mess up, not a clean mess up. The bar does not travel in a straight line anymore at a slant. Now the bar does a crazy zigzag S curvy shape. Watch. It goes straight back, boom, straight back from here to here. And then it starts to rise up a little bit, and you'll see it goes back again at the top. So straight back, then it rises up a little bit, and then boom, back again. So it jerked from here to here, rose up for a little bit, and then jerked back again. Almost like a backwards S shape. And then I lock it out really ugly. And you can see how weak my lockout is now because of how off my positioning was. And look how far away the bar is from our initial bar path now. And remember, this third rep, this bar started in front of this line. This line was already too far forward, and this one started in front of it. So this bar literally went from here to here. That's like 6-7 solid inches of motion front to back this bar made in this third and final rep. And you can see why the rep was so damn ugly. So watch, now that we know that the first rep was the cleanest, second rep was still all right, but didn't use enough hips, and the third rep just went to hell. And watch how easy the first rep looks compared to the second and then the third. First rep, nice and fast, but off center. Second rep, fast, off center, didn't use enough hips, slowed down at the top. And third rep, ugly and slow because it was just everything was wrong. Boom, look how slow that lockout was. Now part of that's going to come from just heavy weight, and your third rep obviously, it's going to be the slowest rep. But we definitely did not help ourselves out there by being so out of position. So I hope this paints a really good picture. Watch when I put the weight down. Look how far away from our bar path that landed. That's where that weight should have began. So I hope this paints a good picture, guys. Even as you get stronger and better at lifting, and even when you know what to do correctly, it's always a good idea to film yourself or have a training partner who's equally knowledgeable watch you so you can catch these mistakes. So now I was able to analyze this, and I know what to fix moving forward.